is what kind of feelings do the words here on the screen, primarily these two, what do they inspire in you?
Anger.
Anger. Rage.
Ambivalence.
Ambivalence.
It's getting too big.
That's keep them down to fewer syllables. Anybody? Feelings? Problems with this? You understand this well? Do you even know what this means? Anybody here doesn't know what this means? You're just here because you thought you'd sit in place?
It's the camera.
Yeah, that draws people in a lot of times. That's one of the reasons we're here. Oh, so, is that really? Okay, cool. I wrote a library called FuturesJS. Microsoft was the first I know of to write a flow control library, but theirs was under this license that, it's kind of like, can you use it, can't you use it? Like, you have to be an educational institution and not making profit. I was like, well, that sucks. And I think their library was all right. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But it just didn't have a good license. And then, like, Crockford, he came out with some slides. If you haven't checked out yuiblog.com/Crockford, you definitely should, because it's got great videos there that if you're programming in JavaScript and you haven't watched them, then you're not programming as good as you could be. And so, like, right around the time that Node was starting up, like before I even got into Node at all, I started writing FuturesJS. And so some of this comes from my experience with writing that, and if you want to play with it, it's the best library that there is. It's a lot simpler than the first time I wrote it, because I wrote it again. I work at SpotRF. We're a radar company. We do some cool stuff with JavaScript and HTML5. So our radar is lunchbox size, and we track objects in a field of view. And it's like 1.5 kilometers is under good conditions. You can see a car out 1.5 kilometers, a person out 1 kilometer. And so, like, as that person or vehicle is traveling towards you, you can see on the screen. Actually, probably I won't bother. But you can see it on the screen. That's one of the cool things we do. Also, we have some internal apps that we use for like debugging and testing and all that. And I might show you one of those a little bit later too. That we've written in with NodeJS and HTML5. So we do some cool stuff, even though we are primarily we sell to the military. We've had really great fortune in being able to do cool stuff, like say we support Chrome and Firefox latest. So whatever day it is when we give out our new version of the product, that is the version of Chrome or Firefox that we support. And for some reason, we haven't gotten any kickback on that, and it works for us. So we're really happy about it. Okay, anyway, jumping into the talk, this right here, this statement. The dearth of discipline and vigilance is the breeding ground for popularity, right? What does that mean? It means, in layman's terms, easy and wrong trumps hard and right. So if it takes effort to do it the right way, and it's easy to do it the wrong way, then we do it the wrong way. And so we're doomed. PHP? Yeah, I don't care whether the code is functionally correct or not. We'll just throw it in there and the script runs. No need for errors or throwing anything. So we get the same problem in JavaScript, but particularly we have this asynchronous stuff in JavaScript, and nothing in the language really addresses it. It's like, because nobody had really built a language before that had this asynchronous nature, and so people have focused on the common problems that are addressed in other languages, like underscore, Lodash, whatever. It's aimed at solving the problem that Ruby solves, but JavaScript isn't Ruby. And although, obviously we want to solve that problem too, there's nothing that's really gained popularity in the same way that solves the JavaScript problem, which is flow control. So flow control problems are nested callback soup, I stole your word. Pyramid of doom, so that tree of death that, I'll show you in a minute. Composition, keyword composition. Asynchronous stuff sucks for being able to do f of g of x. Parasitic inheritance, kind of along the same category there. Consistency, like it'd be nice if you return a value the same way all the time, right? But in JavaScript, sometimes you return it, sometimes you call back, and with returns you can give one value, but with callbacks you can give multiple values. And so there's kind of this like, well, even if you could, how do you merge that together into something that would work? And that leads into backwards compatibility. Like, so we have some of these libraries and efforts like iced coffee and tame.js and some other things, but then you have to have this compiler, and then with some of those solutions, the code comes out really clean, and other of those solutions, it comes out like, what? I didn't write that. And then we have like the problem with error handling and the short stack trace. Anybody ever got like that one-line stack trace and you're like, where did that come from? Right? Like, I don't know what to do. I get that node all the time, and I thought I had gotten out of it because I hadn't seen one in a long time. I was just telling my friend, I was like, yeah, that's not been a problem for me recently. And then like this week, I've had like 3 or 4 cases where I have to spend time digging out a problem because I get a stack trace and it's like http.js 473, and I'm like, what about my code? Where is this? You know? Then adoption. So even if we have this perfect solution that's like simple, it feels great in the language, the syntax and the naming conventions are all good enough, well then we've got like all the big heads in JavaScript just want to fight with each other, or like pretend not to fight with each other and fight with each other silently, or you know, they don't agree on something, and so you know, that's difficult. Security and data privacy, I'll just get to that when we get to that. And then there's like this boilerplate. A lot of times, you know, you don't want to. You're screwed either way, because on the one hand, you can write this flow control stuff manually by hand every single time, or on the other hand, you always have to like require the flow control library, and so there's like this extra 24 characters that you have to type every time, and it's painful. And then that boils down to like discipline. Like, how much discipline do you have? Like, how can I be lazy and effective? You know, so difficult problem. So who wrote this morning, or probably not this morning because you were here? Who wrote this yesterday? Somebody wrote this yesterday. 1 week ago. Okay, you wrote it last week? Okay, so that's, I guess it's a small crowd here, so we're not as diverse. Who wrote this month? Come on, everybody raise your hand. Yes, exactly. Okay. Okay, so we've got this pyramid of doom, do stuff, do other stuff, do more stuff, all done. And there's some problems with this. Some kind of important problems. Is anybody not familiar with this right here? Is anybody like, I just want to make sure I'm speaking to the right crowd. Okay, so let's pretend for a minute that this is legit. Like, this is what we intend to do. Yeah. This is not just happenstance. Like, we want to do it this way, right? It's ugly. It's not like the worst thing ever, because that one's only like 5 lines long. But realistically, you know, review your source code. You've got something where it's indented like with like 27 characters. I don't know how you got 27 doing tabs, probably because you typoed or something. But anyway, so you got this 27 character indent, and you're using like 2 space tabs, so that's like a heck of a lot, right? It's difficult to reorganize because I decided, oh, actually I want to do these things in the other order. Well, you copy and you paste and you re-indent, and you're like, oh, but no, that was the wrong closing bracket, right? And then this could be slow because, well, we'll get into that later, but it could be slow because maybe you should be doing those things sequentially, you should be doing them in parallel. And then it's unsafe because you have scope leak, because you got the scope all the way up here, and you're transmitting all the way down here, and it actually becomes significant pretty quickly, the difference between leaking scope everywhere with anonymous functions and actually carefully constructing your code. You know, for something really small, maybe you don't notice it first, but it actually is a significant problem what it does with your memory consumption and then your garbage collection. So garbage collection, if you've ever been in Node and if you've ever used like a file walk module in Node, then you will have seen this problem as you're printing things out to the screen. Anybody ever use one of the walking utilities in Node? I wrote the best one. Actually, I don't know, it might not be, but what happens is you're going through like 10,000 files, right? And then every once in a while, it just stops for a second, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Did my code break? And then, whoop, and it goes, and then there's like another 10,000 files, and stops for a second or 2 seconds, and then it resumes, and that's the garbage collection. And if you were to do gaming in the browser, there's actually a great blog article that came out like last week. Anybody read about the low, what's it called? Low garbage, low garbage collection.
Yeah, where it doesn't, where it has like a, has an malloc basically through.
Yeah, and that actually, you know, it's relevant because you can get these cases where either your memory or your garbage collection start to affect the stability or the performance of your application. So one way we handle this, we solve a couple of these problems, is doing this thing right here, which we could call de-nested callbacks, or ladder of doom, or waterfall of discombobulation. So does anybody write code like this? Yeah, okay. So like last week, you wrote it like that because you were just writing it really quick, you know, because I'm lazy, right? A dearth of discipline and diligence and vigilance leads to that crappy code. But then this week, you're like, yeah, I've got a few free cycles. I'll go fix that, right? And then, so then you write this, which it's not so bad. It cleans up some of those problems. You're not using anonymous functions. But then it's still kind of weird because, like, the way I do mine is I always define things first, and then I call them afterwards. So, like, I defined all my functions, and then I call it here, and so I kind of have to look in reverse chronological order to figure out what I'm doing. And you don't have to do it that way, but to me, it doesn't make sense the other way, because then when I'm looking for the function, I say, well, if I'm using something here, I should have defined it above. So either way you go, either you're doing it reverse chronological, or you're doing it reverse from when you define the function and when you use it in the code. So that's a little bit weird. And I think I just talked about all those issues. Yeah, but then you can take it a step further. Okay, so let's say that in a really simple case, and this is code that I wrote like 1 a.m. last night, so there's probably an error here. And feel free, and also feel free to interrupt me anytime and ask questions. Whatever. Feel free to point out where it is, but I know there's one here. Anyway, so what you have is you have like an enqueueNext function. And then, so you take all those functions like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, and you start enqueuing them, and then maybe with like a context for thisness or something. And I think I was supposed to do like .apply here and apply the context or something like that. Yeah, so I put this in the wrong place. But so maybe you have like a context or something. But then after you're done, you push all your functions in, and then as it can do them, it does them. And then when as long as there's something to do in your functions, then you continue to pop off a function and then call it, and then do the next thing. And that works kind of well as long as you can guarantee that your callback is a certain order. Like your callback is the first, or it's the third, or it's the second, or it's the fifth. But realistically, I mean, your callback is like in some random order. And so this example kind of breaks down. And so, but anyway, this is kind of how you might use it. You enqueue the functions, and then when you want to start it, you call do next, and then it starts running through the functions and whatnot. So I refactored it a little bit and made something kind of simpler. Well, definitely simpler. And I just guarantee that always the callback parameter is going to be next. So here, I'm, a sequence. I create a sequence. It's part of the futures library. It's independent, but in the same repository. Anyway, so I do first, and then I do second, and then I do last. And then the way that these functions are defined is they all have the next parameter is the very first one. That way, I can guarantee where the order is. And then whenever I call next, I hand it the other parameters. So when I call do first with next arg0, then the prev_arg0 of do second will be this right here. And so then that kind of simplifies it. It makes it a lot easier to work with. So instead of having that pyramid of doom, you've got named functions, and then it's really easy just to cut and paste these and do them in a different order or something. Makes a lot nicer, cleaner code. And then likewise, there's a function called for each async, and the way I go about that is I pass in the array, and then whatever function is going to get called over and over again, and then some sort of thisness, thatness, context thing, and then whatever is going to get done, that should have been over here, somehow rendered over there. But then something when all the things are done. So if I run this, it waits 1 second, it says one thing, two thing, red thing, blue thing. You know? And then I feel pretty and witty and bright after I said something like that. Dr. Seuss, please. Yeah, good. I like Dr. Seuss. He's a good guy. Ouch. So, not that you'd ever want to print to the screen one thing, two thing, red thing, blue thing. But do you get the idea of how this is useful? Like if you have an array of things, you want to run the same function on it. It's an asynchronous function. Yes? No? Yes? Okay, good. So, yeah, sorry that some of the examples here, they're just really contrived, but I promise they are useful. And so with this approach, or if you use a library that has an approach like this, there's a clear scope, there's appropriate thisness, it's pretty easy to read, browser node compatible, but the problem is still it's not part of the language. It's still something that you have to require, or script tag include, or whatever it is that you're working with. And then there's all this confusion as to well, what does then mean, and what does next mean, and what does when mean? And, people complain about these things. So it's still not a perfect solution. But going back to this, oh wait, no, that one. What? No. Yes. So between these two versus that, it's at least a little more manageable, right? But we got to be honest with ourselves. You're not doing this because it's procedural code and you actually want this to get done after that. Well, you are some of the time, but why are you doing it this way?
It's easy.
No, that's not it. It's because you're lazy. Because you're lazy. Because realistically, you might have a use case like you want to make a request of some sort, whatever request library you use, and you want to get all these tweaks, and then you want to go get all these wall posts. And then when you get them, you want to put them together so that you can have them. And so you can do it the previous way, but then you've got all the latency and the wait time. So when you could get it done in half the time, because Twitter's going to take some time to respond, Facebook's going to take some time to respond, you're compounding that so it takes twice as long as it needs to. So when you're a noob, I swear to you, believe it or not, I wrote code like this, exactly like this when I was trying to solve this problem, linking between, so I was working with some friends trying to create a service that, actually we created it, but then we didn't carry it on, so it never became a thing. It's called ClueList, and what it was is it linked the things that you liked on Facebook with the Amazon API, so when somebody's birthday was coming up, they would show up on top. So whoever's birthday or anniversary or wedding was coming up, they would show up on top, and then it would show suggestions for them from Amazon. And so when I was first writing that's how I came up with this thing. But then Facebook changed their API 3 times in that 2-month period because they were migrating to the Graph API and so then I just got fed up and we never finished it. But anyway, so here I've got this 100 millisecond latency at most where I know whether or not posts and tweets exist, but this is absolutely wretched code, right? I mean, does anybody not know why this is bad? Because that's bad. That's stupid. But I was stupid then. I didn't know anything about JavaScript back then. I think I just barely started playing with jQuery. This is probably 3 or 4 years ago. But anyway, so yeah, that's really bad. And then, But then this is the code that you guys write, right? Because you're a little bit smarter than that. So what you probably do is you count your functions in your file, like, well, I've got this thing, and I got this thing, and I got this thing, and so I've got 3 functions, and I'll just have all of them check remaining, and then when I'll decrement it, and then when there's 0 remaining, then I'll show how cool I am, because I'll intersperse my tweets and my wall posts. And you'll know how cool I am, because I counted down from how many functions I had to not having any. So who writes this code? Yeah, okay. And you, yeah?
They actually have that function under store, and you execute something so many times, and then after like the 4th time it goes, hey, there's no more left, I must execute it. So it's kind of similar. I haven't done it personally.
Okay. Well, I think this is code that a lot of people end up writing over and over and over again. It's not so bad, you know. It's only like 6 lines long there, and so you get by. You know, you rewrite the same 6 lines every single time, and life's okay. Hmm?
Remembering to change the number 2 and everything.
But that's the thing that bites you. So the man speaking from experience over here. Yeah, so that's the thing that bites you is you forget to change the number 2, and that's why this is not quite so maintainable. So, well, then the next evolutionary step is you do something like this, where, you know, again, you're going to pass in a function and some args, and you're going to increment the counter for the function that you're putting in, and then every time, and you're just going to let all of them run at once, and every time one of them runs, you decrement that. And so here you've got a function where you pass in your function, and it's kind of more maintainable, but kind of a little confusing. And so you probably wouldn't use it. And then the argument passing is still awkward because you still don't know where your callback is going to be. So you have to like say, well, in my API, I mean, if you're smart, you just put your callback first, right? Because it's a parameter you always need. And when you don't need it, you can just pass in null and not do anything with it. But the thing is, people are like, well, I don't want to pass in my callback first because then I can't write anonymous functions because it looks ugly. And I'm like, well, you're ugly because you're using anonymous functions everywhere and you shouldn't be. But we're lazy and we're not vigilant. And easy and bad is better than hard and good. So we do it. But then this was my abstraction that I came up with. So I have a join. And then I'll just skip right down to here. We got this request.get, and then I just poop in a callback. I actually wanted to call this method poop. Like I seriously considered it, but then I was like, that won't catch on. So you poop a callback wherever the callback goes, and then that increments the counter and everything. And then when you're done, you call undone, and then it gives you back your args, but this is an array of the args. Now, interesting thing I found out this morning is that jQuery implements join and promises exactly the same way that I do, except they came up with it first. I swear to you. I mean, it's a general programming concept, and I kind of learned it from Crawford and whatever. But it's the exact same API, except you switch out the names. And like internally, if you built your API with promises like they do, they have in every single function there's a line that's got to be something like var p equals new promise, or var d equals new deferred, and then they always return d, and then somewhere in there they call like d dot resolve, and then on the other end it's like d dot then or something like that, or d dot defer. I don't know what it is. But anyway, so this is actually, this works the exact same way. And join.add can actually accept a promise, and if you don't provide a promise, then it poops out a callback. So that's how that works anyway. But the problem is that when you're actually trying to write your own stuff, you're not going to be vigilant enough to always do the var d equals new deferred and then return d, because it's an extra 24 characters and that's annoying. But if you did, then you could write perfectly composable code and it actually solves the problem. But again, it's like, if you choose to do it, you will have great code, but you've got to put in that 2 lines every single time. It's kind of annoying. But anyway, so this is just a way that you don't have to do that because it poops out a promise for you, basically. So it's pretty good, solves the problem well, pretty easy to reason about. Browser compatible. But still, the arguments passing is awkward because, well, in CoffeeScript, you can destructure it, right? So you can have that array, and then you could like give it the name. So if you're using CoffeeScript, the arguments passing actually isn't awkward if you're doing this. Either the jQuery one or mine. But then again, like people are going to bite you. Like, should be called add, should be called when, should be called then, should be called defer, await, etc. And then I don't know how the slide got here. It kind of applies to the other ones. I'll just go really quickly at it. So there's this other idea. Like sometimes you don't want to do everything at once. Like the join idea. You don't want to do like bam everything. Because maybe you have like I don't know. Maybe you're scraping ratemyprofessor.com. And you're getting their entire database, and it takes 2 hours, and you don't want to do all 10,000 of those requests at once. But you want to do more than one at a time, because one at a time, it takes the whole 2 hours, and if you can spread it out and do 4 requests at a time or 10 requests at a time, then it's going to take less time because, well, you just avoid some of the overhead there of waiting. And that's what this is. It's just, you give it some sort of function and then some sort of number of how many threads in the pool. Because I mean, really, when we think about asynchronous callbacks, you know, a web request is going into a thread pool in Node and in the browser. It goes into a thread pool, and so you're still dealing with threads. It's just a lot prettier. But so I call it a thread pool because I don't know what else you call it, a callback pool, whatever. But anyway, it's the same thing, and then this will do some number at a time rather than doing all at a time. We're doing only one at a time. So with all that, we've pretty much solved the problems, right? So we have the parallel problem. It solved it. It's not the worst, not the best, not the worst. We solved the sequential problem, and we solved the pooling problem. So we're good. The end. Happy bunnies. Oh no. No, we're not. We're not. Oh. So we still have this problem of function composition. It's like the worst problem ever because who wrote this code this week? There's some library that you had, right? And it's got an important do stuff function. It's going to do some stuff. And you assign that to old do stuff. And then you assign your new do stuff function, which is going to be awesome. Like, for example, it's going to log something for you because you're trying to debug it and you want to like get into the internal. So you're just like, I'll just monkey patch this. And now I'll be able to understand this function, or I'll be able to like manipulate the arguments as they're coming in a better way. Like some head nodding here, like you've done this, right? Yeah? Okay. So that's cool. And like my be awesome function here, this one's actually better than yours because I look for anything that looks like a number and I increment it by 1 before I pass it on. Weird lead in, another slide that probably should have been everywhere. But the DOM got this composition thing right, actually, because there's 2 ways of doing it, and some people would say, well, there should only be one way, and I won't argue with you if that's the way you feel. But I feel like they've discovered 2 use cases, and they actually got it right. I mean, other than this ugly like add event listener instead of just being .on and .off. But it works. Like, you can either do callbacks where it's really simple and you just have a function first, so you know the function's always first, or really simple. So if you have multiple data parameters, like one's a progress event, another is a click event, you know, you have all these different events that describe data in different ways. Instead of passing back like, you know, 10 arguments, you just pass back 1 and you have different events. And that's the way Node does it, that's the way the browser does it, and it's a good idea. And I like it. So 2 strategies, both reliable. But it's the one thing, aside from all the atrocious naming conventions and the Ajax stuff, that jQuery got wrong. Because then every single time that you want to do this, you end up having to copy and paste this. And this is like the simple one, you know? Like this is just if ops is a function or arguments is less than 2, then callback is ops, and then if callback is undefined, you know, not too bad. And it only looks this long because I couldn't fit it on the slide that way, right? So this is not too bad, but then you got the one where it's like, you know, the arguments is less than like 4, and if this is a string, but if it can be parsed as a number, but if both of them are functions, and I actually don't know, oh, guys, eyes on you, jQuery. I actually don't know if, like, jQuery is the one to blame for this convention of starting the callbacks last, but before I did jQuery, I just wrote really crappy code because I didn't know JavaScript at all yet, and I was still, like, wrapping my mind around Clojure. And jQuery is what got me into the habit of doing that atrocious way of putting the callback last, and I think that's kind of what then influenced Node to put the callback last, and so now we have what this just a trope. So maybe it's not their fault, but whoever's fault it is, watch it. No, be right. And then just obligatory rant. And this is what I'm talking about, the Ajax API. Like, there are standard names for these things, people. It's called a method. Type is different. It's called a query, not data. It's called body, not data. And query and body can happen at the same time. You can post something with both a query and a body, unless you're using jQuery. And then content type, like, I don't know. There's standard names for these. Let's. Geniuses. We think. But, ranting aside, jQuery is wonderful, and I love it. Yeah. It's that kind of love. True love. Okay. So, back to the consistency issue. So this is the things I don't have solutions for right now. But I'm hoping that maybe some of you will like upvote this video on YouTube, and then like maybe one of these people that are important will see it and actually consider it and be like, oh, that guy's got an idea here. Or you know, like, I'm hoping that this idea will fall into the right hands somewhere. So, like I was saying before, they're starting to implement other things in JavaScript and adding new syntax and yada yada, and they're kind of like it's like envy, right? Like Python envy and Ruby envy. Like, well, like, Ruby does this, and Python does that. Well, let's put that into the language. And they're like trying to solve problems that, to me, aren't the important problems that I need to solve. Because, I mean, like when it's an important problem I have to solve, I just like use Lodash, right? But this is a problem that needs solving in the language. Like, what? I want to have multiple return values, and I want to have something consistent, whether it's an asynchronous function or whether it's not. And so I think that a good way to go about this would be that if there was like a complete keyword or something that just was part of functions, just like arguments is part of functions, just like they're adding yield, just like they're adding the .next, there was a simple keyword like this, where if you completed synchronously or asynchronously, it gives you back some sort of deferred thing or something, or maybe if it's synchronous, it just gives you back the value right away, or I don't know, something. But then you can just like call complete, and whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, it's just consistent, and I think that would be great. But there's still this other problem too of like the data privacy. That like so yeah, there's do stuff and then depending on what then means, because some people say then means that you can do both at the same time, and other people say, well, you know, that means it's sequential, whatever, I don't care. Like, pick your poison. It doesn't matter to me. But in either case, you can have inconsistent results here because you might have some sort of like promise or whatever object, and this guy modifies that data. You know, he's like, awesome, so he increments all the integers by 1. It's like 1 better. I left it better than I found it by 1, right? And then this guy is expecting the original data, but then he doesn't get the original data, or worst case, you know, maybe then doesn't determine that they're done in sequential order, and they could go either way. So then maybe this guy sometimes gets called first, and other times this guy gets called first. You know, so that's a concern. Like, if you're looking at one of these libraries, you got to consider that issue. Is that important to you? And I think to a lot of the people that are high up in like the committees of JavaScript, that is an important issue, and that's one of the things that keeps them from standardizing on one of these promise libraries, because a lot of them don't really address this, or if they do, they address it in a really awkward way. There's that new ES5 object.freeze. Does anybody use that? Yeah, I mean, it's cool, but when you don't even have privacy in prototypes, and the way that you define privacy in prototypes for a lot of people is just to put an underscore in there, and that is a visual cue. Like, if you modify this, it's not part of the public API, you can't rely on it to be there, and you really shouldn't be modifying it, but hey, if you're going to modify it, do your thing. So, you know, there's that. And then there's the error handling. Tim Caswell, we were talking at lunch, and he actually said he came up with some way to do something funky in Node that would actually solve the stack trace problem. And maybe they could solve it in the browser somehow. I think it was a V8 plugin, we would say, he was writing or working with somebody. But anyway, so this thing is just difficult, right? Because you get those stack traces and they're one line long, and you can avoid anonymous functions, and that helps. And it seems like this condition where you get the one line stack trace is usually caused by event handlers, such as like an add event listener to click, or like a set timeout or set interval or something like that. Those are the kind of things that really cause you to lose your stack. So if you ever get in that case where you have the one line error, I would suggest maybe poking around where you have a set timeout or something like that where it has lost its stack at that point. I think that Node has it right though. I think that for this, you know, for one particular use case where you just either have an error or data, this is really simple. Not having like a success callback and an error callback and a progress callback. You know, if you're going to do that, then do it with events. And then if you're going to do like the really simple thing, just error first and then data. I think it's a really good solution. So I'd advise you guys to do that as well when you're writing your code. Just pass the error through in cases where you can catch it, and then you can deal with it appropriately, and then hopefully, because it's your code, you'll be able to follow it back and find out where that error came from. And then using emitters, the Node's event emitter, it works in the browser just fine. I think there's like one line that has to change, and I've got it submitted to NPM in a browser version that has that one line changed. But the event emitter is great, so use that. It'll help you clean up your code. And there's something else. Prototypes can really help you. I didn't have a slide for this, but if you write your classes in prototypes, then you have a context like a thisness. And so even if you don't go with like a flow control library or anything, you can at least have your all of your data stored in your thisness, so you don't have to have all that closure stuff. I meant to mention that earlier. Okay, so then some of the solutions that are out there, like fibers or tame.js or whatever, I kind of talked about that a little bit at the beginning. They do things like this, which are really cool, where you can call something that's asynchronous, and it actually just like pauses right there and waits for the callback and then returns it. So it behaves as though it were synchronous code, but it allows other stuff on the event stack to go while it's waiting. But then the problem, as I was saying before, is when you compile those kind of, they require a compiler unless it's Node. Node actually has like a plugin that will add this feature to the language. But they require a compiler, and then when you get your compiled code out at the end, from what I hear, you can't really tell which way is which.
It's insane spaghetti. When you finish the CPS transform, you pop it.
Yeah, so he says it's impossible to know what's going on. So sounds like he's got more experience than I have. I've read about it and decided not to use it. And then also just like was anybody in Tim's talk earlier? So I mean, like he says, if you go into JavaScript, this isn't why. I mean, if this is your problem in JavaScript, then use Ruby or Python, because we in JavaScript we like this asynchronous stuff, even though it's a little mind-boggling sometimes. But we like it, and we don't really want to fix it in this fashion. So there's been lots of people that have complained on the mailing list, and they come up with these solutions where they streamline or fiber or continuation or whatever these buzzwords are, but then like they get this backlash, and they're like, "Why? I spent so much time, and it's beautiful." And it's like, well, yes, it is. But if you want that, just go use Ruby, because Ruby has that built in, you know, and you don't see it, and so, or that's what I was told by one of my Ruby friends anyway. Yeah, so it's not JavaScript-y, and then the big guys never considered. So, but then this other problem we have is, and the asynchronous solution is the adoption, right? We got Crockford from the TC39/Yahoo. We have John Resig from jQuery. We got Jeremy Ashkenaz from CoffeeScript, Backbone, _ and Isaac Schroeder. Sorry, Isaac. Yeah, that one from Node. And then there's a couple other people in the community, but these are like 4 big guys, right? And you can't put them in a room together. Maybe you can't. I haven't like been to TexasJS, but actually, I had a suggestion. I was arguing with somebody about something the other day, and I was like, look, we just need to go to TexasJS and shoot it out. Whoever's left standing wins, and we follow their standard. But yeah, so like Crockford has nothing to do with Node, and Isaac has almost nothing to do with CoffeeScript, maybe nothing to do with CoffeeScript. I'm sure he's made comments on the GitHub. And Resig has nothing, you know, so these guys, they have dissimilar interests, and I don't know that they really have an interest in coming together for the sake of the peoples. Like, there's not like the people's champion.
Brendan kind of is.
Brendan?
Right?
Yeah.
He wants to undo all of the...
Yeah.
So, but I don't see him participating in like these GitHub issues and stuff and these flame wars.
He stays out of it.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna be the people's champion, you gotta get in there, right?
There's no solving that.
Yeah. So anyway, if you can see them agreeing on anything at all, check your T-shirts. Right? I wish I could show the
Yeah,
T-shirts.
that's a typical and optional thing.
Yeah. I think I got it in my bag
We're
here.
seeing it.
That's that's the speaker T-shirt. I love this. I saw this for the first time this morning. I saw some ideas floating around on the mailing list, but I didn't know they had decided on this one. Beautiful. Love it. Semicolon's optional, right? So, you know, it's just kind of a mess there. Oh, sorry. This isn't that kind of presentation. I'm trying to keep it PG rated. And now just for some pop quiz trivia, because I just thought it was interesting. Did you know, not related to the talk at all, XML is a scripting language for Java? I had to program in Java like 3 weeks ago. And I was like, well, where's the documentation for this? They're like, oh, it's all in the XML. It's generated from the XML. And I'm like, well, what's the API? Where's the code at? Oh, it's all the code's generated from the XML. And I'm like, so XML is the scripting language for Java. So what does that make JavaScript, right? That doesn't have anything to do with Java. It turns out, well, it compiles to machine code, right? At least on browsers. And I think even in Internet Explorer now. So, I mean, is that even a scripting thing anymore? But I also found out this morning, or was it last night, that JSON is the scripting language of ext.js. Just some fun trivia. Anyway, so questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, feelings of the heart.
There are use cases for fibers in Node, and I think I'm only bringing it up because it's so bad on the boards. Like you can't say like I use fibers in a project that went well without just getting destroyed. Like you cannot say that on the NodeJS form. So in a room this big, I think that I can run away before you can all kill me. So you can totally use Node fibers in certain situations. It's great. It does have its place. Obviously, you can't use it on the client side at all. It's totally just a Node thing to V8. But it's worth looking at for some use cases. And it works really well too. It's not very good. Marcel wrote it as well.
Well, that's cool.
It's worth noting.
Yeah.
I think that for me, I'm going to go and create, do the use case by hand. Saying, okay, I'm going to call 2 different things asynchronously, get the results back, and then have both results passed to a third function, so I can see how that abstracts to something I can use all the time. Because I'm just not seeing the whole, I'm just not seeing all at once at the moment.
Yeah, that's totally acceptable. Like, and again, well, not again, but I said this, well, again, because I said it this morning. Somebody asked, like, well, there's all of these libraries, which one should I use? And I said, well, you know, you fast and you pray about it and you make a decision with heavenly inspiration. But realistically, it's good to write your own library for this. It's good to think about the problem, to reason it out in your mind, and to come to a conclusion so you understand it. Just don't publish it, please. Okay? Because there's nothing you can write that somebody else hasn't already written the exact same way, probably line per line. Because when Node started becoming popular, like everybody and their brother was posting on the Node list with like, hey, I wrote a flow control library. And then Tim thinks that he wrote the first 4, but I did.
Who said that?
Actually,
But he based one of them on mine.
what a jerk! Yeah, Microsoft wrote the first one. They just didn't license it in a way that you could use it. But yeah, so I would definitely say, you know, reason about it in your mind. And you might want to take a look at these slides again. Like, I know that there are errors in this code because like this was like fabricated, but it's based on the process that I went through as I learned to write my library. So if you look over it a second time, the slides are currently posted on Twitter, and they'll also be posted when in the like after the conference email that gets sent out to everybody. But yeah, you know, arrive at your own conclusions. But there's basically only like 3 or 4 things that you run into like day after day after day, and it's the same kind of problem with the join, the sequence, the for each async, and then the lateral things solve. And then you could go the way that jQuery does. I mean, if you want to write a really nice API, there's 2 more things you can do. One is you have modifier, or you have like getter functions and modifier functions. So you have like this prototype, and you call like .get tweets, and it knows inside what the URL is, and then you call like .limit, and then like .sort, and like these modifier things. You can create really beautiful APIs that way, and then like at the end of all your chaining, call .win or something, or and I did that, but then I never used it because the boilerplate is just too high. But it makes a really beautiful API. And same thing with like what jQuery did with their deferred system. It's the exact same thing API-wise as the promises that I wrote and joints that I wrote. Not that they were inspired by me, just we probably were both inspired by Crawford and some other examples on the web. But then you have to do var d equals new deferred, return d in every single function in your entire application for it to work. But then you get beautifully composable code that's way easy to work with.
So you were talking about some of the support for this, or support that you wish would come for this in JavaScript Next, or something like at the language level. If you're interested in that and some of the general programming concepts around promises and things like that, check out the 2 new keywords that were introduced in C# 5, new version of the language just came out, async and await. And basically it's syntactic sugar around stuff like that for like handling the phrase and use C# code really easily composable. So a lot of similar concepts that I see there. And along with that, so like the Microsoft library you're referencing, the reactive JS?
No, this was like 3 years ago. So it's not anything that became popular. It was like a blog. It was one of those like, here's some code that I'm doing to show you that we're valuable members of the community. License that you can't use it. But
yeah. So one of the APIs that they're pushing for their Windows 8 native client code is a JavaScript-based API on top of their WinRT platform, and it uses a lot of promises and asynchronous stuff too. So
cool. All right.